Hi everyone, my name is Thomas Ron, and I'm currently doing a project about populists in mainstream political parties. This presentation looks at one of my case studies, Jeremy Corbyn in the Labour Party, and how he failed to engage with local politics and local government in the Labour Party. So, why does local government matter, I guess is the first question. And the reason is that local government are the foot soldiers of a political party. They're the ones that campaign every week. More importantly, in marginal constituencies, they're the ones that actually campaign within the areas Labour needs to win, right? The wards that Labour needs to stack up the votes in to win in a parliamentary election are the ones that they tend to have Labour councillors in. So they're the ones that are knocking on doors. They hear opinions. They're always perpetually in power as well, right? Even in the darkest days of a Tory government, Labour will have power. In the darkest days of a Labour government, the Tories will have power in council. So local government officials are very important to a political party. They're also important as a bridge between the MPs and the membership, right? Members of Parliament often engage with the councils, so if they're in the same party, they are able to bridge the gap between the members that they're closer to, as well as to the MP that's there. So they're a vital check, and they see themselves as a vital check on any electoral prospects the party may have. So their opinions are important, and it's important to see how party leaders engage with them. So, in 2015, Labour councillors had transformed from the 80s, from a group that had been seen as more on the hard left, to a moderate group, right? We remember in the 80s the names that were associated with the Labour hard left, people like Derek Hatton, Ted Knight. That had by and large gone over the Blair government, and the new class of councillors were much more managerial, they were much more moderate, they focused more on engaging with the council rather than declaring their areas nuclear-free zones. This was encouraged, by the way, by Blair and by the local government association, who would often send people to councils that were failing, which were often failing due to the hard left, and encourage a new class of councillors. So often this new class of councillors were not that enthusiastic about Corbyn, right? So here's a pie chart. I've interviewed 75 councillors. As you can see, while Corbyn does get the most votes, it's nowhere near the margin he got from the membership at large, right? He won the first ballot of the membership by a substantial margin. Here he gets just over a third of the vote, right? And that's mostly from backbench councillors, and most of them councillors that weren't even elected in 2015, as opposed to Yvette Cooper really overperforms here. Andy Burnham does well. Liz Kendall actually stays roughly the same, right? So it's not that the councillors have become Blairites, actually. They were just, by and large, quite moderate members of Labour. You've got a nice sort of three-way tie. Most of the councillors who I spoke to about why they didn't vote for Corbyn said electability was the reason. They were worried that Corbyn just could not win an election. And that's why they didn't back him, right? So from the start, you can see the councillors are much more worried about their local areas, about their councils, and about getting elected rather than over some sort of grand political goal. So Corbyn gets elected. How does he deal with local councillors? Well, many of them say that he didn't really engage with them, right? These two quotes are quotes from council leaders in rock-solid Labour areas that we didn't even manage to lose in 2019, that demonstrate their view of how Corbyn engaged, right? They either didn't engage, they thought that local government was an afterthought. To be fair to Corbyn, this is not actually a new phenomenon. A lot of them noted that Blair, Brown, Miliband had also been distant figures. They never really engaged. So it's not like Corbyn was particularly bad at engaging, but he wasn't also very good at engaging. His first community's local government secretary was John Trickett, who had actually been a former council leader, yet he never gained much support. The guy who made the first quote, he said that he had never engaged with John Trickett once, despite the fact that he is not just the leader of a major Labour council, but he's also a big figure on the local government association of Labour's group of the LGA, right? So this is someone who probably should be engaging with the community and local government secretary, and he had not spoken to John Trickett once. And this is not an isolated instance. Many others said that they just didn't feel like John Trickett cared about the role. He never really engaged. It was half-hearted at best, which is indicative of the fact that Corbyn's allies didn't see local government as a big deal, even the ones who had been councillors. His successor, Andrew Gwynn, who came in, I believe, in 2018, was much more positively received. Right? A lot of them said that Gwyn had been a councillor as well. Gwyn's wife is a current councillor. So there's a feeling like Gwyn actually understood what councillors needed and wanted. Um, and he was a positive figure. However, a lot of them also noted they didn't think Gwyn was actually being listened to at the local level. So, I'm sorry, at the shadow cabinet level. No one thought that Gwyn was being engaged with. So even though he was close to councillors, he wasn't close to Corbyn. And that type of engagement never really took off. So there's two stages here. There's one where they pick an ally who doesn't really want the job, and they pick someone who's closer to local government, but they don't really listen to him. Corbyn doesn't listen to him. His team doesn't listen to him. And of course, the big difference here is that Corbyn never really had that much support amongst local government, right? Blair did, Brown did, and Miliband did, right? Even Miliband, even if you consider local councillors probably broke a bit for David, it probably was about 50-50. Whereas here, Corbyn just about edges it out, but it's a three-way split, right? That's 2/3 of councillors that aren't that keen on him. So he never sees that as a problem. He never sees that as important to engage. And that indicates one of the major issues with Corbyn's leadership overall, that he doesn't engage with groups that don't listen to him. In fairness, he's pretty good at engaging with his local councillors. Actually, many people commented that Islington councillors were quite friendly with Corbyn and said that he spoke to them quite a lot. So there's actually a break between his work as a constituency MP, where he does see the value of local government, and his work as a leader, where he either doesn't see the value or doesn't see this as an area that he can engage with, both of which are not very healthy options. What exacerbates the issue is Momentum, the group that is formed out of Corbyn's leadership campaign. They almost immediately end up at odds with councillors. These are two quotes, one of them from a council leader, one of them from an executive councillor who became a parliamentary candidate. As you can see, they're not particularly friendly towards Momentum. Momentum, by and large, were not interested in the programmatic areas of local government. They weren't interested in what local government could actually do. This is especially increased after John McDonnell openly said that he did not want to see councils setting illegal budgets, which was one of the big things Militant did, right? So that meant that any Momentum council would have to be stuck with the parameters of local government spending, with the amount of money the Tories gave them. That's something that they probably didn't want to do because, as many councillors point out, that much money requires cutting, and Momentum probably didn't want to do that. So they were disinterested in the minutiae of local government, and they also didn't see what local councillors did. Many Momentum members spoke about the need to engage with the community, to speak to people not during elections, which many councillors also seem to think that that's what they did, right? So by and large, what would end up happening is Momentum members would come in and councillors would view them as telling them how to do their jobs or telling them to do a job they were already doing, which tends to get a bit of a hostile reaction. So from the start, councillors didn't particularly care for Momentum. Momentum was not interested in the good that councillors could do, and they didn't see the councillors they had as being particularly relevant. It was also a matter of feeling that a lot of Labour elected officials that were not called Jeremy Corbyn were sellouts or red Tories, right? And especially given that councillors on the whole did not back Corbyn, and most of the councillors in that pie chart that did back him had not been elected yet, there was a genuine feeling of hostility. In some areas, that hostility led to Momentum organising deselections. Most of the time, this wasn't successful. They tended to organise deselections in councils where Labour was in power. In the ones where Labour was only marginally in power, they were unsuccessful because most of the softer Momentum members just did not want to deselect councillors because they were afraid that they'd lose those seats to the opposition party, right? So, for example, in Cambridge, there's a very narrow Labour majority. So deselecting a councillor is not something that many people want to do. It's just seen as unnecessarily destructive. In areas like Liverpool, they were a bit more successful, but even then, Momentum councillors never really made it onto the executive, right? By and large, executives locked Momentum out of power, and when they saw threats, they would organise strongly against that, right? In Leicester, I have a councillor said that she'd never before had to canvass her ward for support, but she did to avoid getting deselected, and she was successful. So councillors, when they knew they were on the chopping block, they would organise, they would fight against it. And by and large, they had very strong ways of avoiding being deselected. And the ones that were deselected, the new Momentum councillors, never really made it up the council hierarchy. There are some exceptions, like Exeter, where new leadership was a lot more interested in working with Momentum. But these are the exception rather than the rule. And again, these are areas where Labour is dominant in, not just the biggest party, but the only game in town. In areas where that didn't happen, just there was no success by Momentum. There are some high-profile areas where they did deselect councillors and they did take over, like Haringey, but actually, by and large, the way they've run the council is not very different from the councillors they deselected. So there's not. So again, Momentum. If you're a radical Momentum member, you've effectively deselected people and then done their job. So it's basically starting a bunch of fights and not really changing very much. So Momentum were never well received, right? They didn't really care about local elections, right? They organized loads of people for general elections. That's been very well documented. But local elections, they didn't really try. And whenever they engaged with councillors, it was either to tell them they weren't doing their jobs properly, they were red Tories, or trying to deselect them. So basically, councillors very quickly fell out of love with Momentum, if they even had any love to begin with. So, on the whole, what do we see? We see that Corbyn and his project never saw councillors as an important part of the party to get on board, and thus, they never really dealt with the concerns. The only big thing that Corbyn did that councillors liked was saying, don't set illegal budgets, and that was mainly John McDonnell, who's actually a figure councillors like a lot more. Councillors were already worried about his electability to begin with, and of course, losing local elections, as Labour lost most local elections. The only one that I think they did somewhat well in was 2018, and that was because of London municipal elections, where Labour is doing very well, right? 2016, 2017, 2019, Labour went backwards. So that the concerns about electability were not assuaged at all by Corbyn, and then you had this group Momentum that was continuously attacking councillors, not being stopped by the leadership, no one stepping in to deal with the abuse councillors were getting. And that turned local government from an area that was lukewarm on Corbyn to one that was openly hostile. So Corbyn's lack of caring, lack of attention to local government, plus the hostility of people that were seen to be close to him, really made local government not like Jeremy Corbyn. And that's one of the reasons why Momentum and Corbyn have really struggled to make any headway into local government. Thank you very much.